Welcome to the 7th episode of Women Just Like You, a podcast full of advice for women in the middle of their careers, directly from women who are in the middle of theirs. I'm your host, Audrey the Career Woman, a fellow mid-career woman. And our guest this week is Katherine Bell, a coworker of mine at Asana who is doing something scary and trying something new at work. Her career started in urban planning, made her way into account management, and then really dove into the data side of the revenue business. With nearly 15 years of experience, Katherine's got a lot of advice to share for women at various stages of their careers, and I'm so thrilled she's joining us on the show today. In our conversation, we're going to get into the honest truth behind asking for feedback, what it was like navigating bureaucracy early in her urban planning roles, and how Katherine is thinking through a significant point of her career today. She shares what it's really like to try to make a lateral move within a company, and how she's continuously trying to learn more and challenge herself along the way as she works to become a data scientist. We are truly so lucky that Katherine has pulled back the curtain at this stage in her career, since I know so many women out there are trying new things for the first time and scared out of their minds. She is right there with you and bringing us along for the ride as she tries to move from data analyst to data scientist. So with that, let's buckle up and dive into the conversation with Katherine, a woman trying something new who laughs a lot along the way, just like you. All right. Well, Katherine, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. I'm so excited to talk with you about your career journey from college all the way to where you are now today. So I would love to kick us off with going back to your roots on when you were a kid. What did you want to be when you grew up and why?
Well, I haven't thought about that in a long time, but I think my parents and my family are in the sciences, and they always encouraged me to dream big, and I dreamed about being an astronaut. So,
An astronaut.
yeah, I always thought it'd be so fun to like float in space and eat water and globs.
Did you ever eat the freeze-dried food when you were a kid?
Oh my gosh, yes. So I actually grew up in Alabama, and I don't know if you're familiar with Space Camp, but there's Space Camp in northern Alabama, and like this, there's a Space and Rocket Center. So we'd go up there and go to the museum, and go, of course, obviously go to the gift shop, and we'd buy the freeze-dried ice cream. And it always seemed so much better in my memory, but I had it once recently, and it's not good.
It's not good. No, it's not. I think it is just such a fun experience to eat ice cream out of a bag that you think it's the coolest thing.
It
And
is so
today,
cool. It was
like,
so
what did it
crunchy.
taste like now?
It was like eating chalk, really. But it was like very crispy and like dry. Yeah,
Crispy chalk.
crispy
You,
chalk, like a hint of strawberry.
all right, cool. Well, if I ever have freeze-dried food to try, I'll send it your way first. And if there's like meteor showers or anything, like I'll hit you up because I bet you've just looked at that stuff for probably years and years at this point. Great. Well, so grew up wanting to be an astronaut. I imagine you're not an astronaut today.
I'm not an astronaut. I'm actually a data analyst at Asana, and so I kind of had a very circuitous path to get there, but I'm enjoying it.
Can you tell us a little bit about your career path today? Like, how did you go from wanting to be an astronaut to in the data world?
Yeah, so in between wanting to be an astronaut and graduating from college, I decided that I actually wanted to be an urban planner. So I was really fascinated with how people decide to live and kind of the way that we structure ourselves as human in our physical environment. And so in high school, I started really getting into the structure of cities and understanding how that works, and like that there's actually jobs for how people decide to make things work in our built environment. And so I went to college, and my major was urban studies. And so really looking at like the social, economic, and political structure of cities, and how we live in them today. So that was like 4 years of like really digging into that and graduating college, I still wanted to be an urban planner and was really excited about that and started working at some nonprofits in the Bay Area and also like working with some, I guess you would say, like consultants on like in the space. So I worked there for a number of years, trying to get my feet wet in the field.
That's awesome. How did you go from Alabama to the Bay Area? Was it because of urban planning and trying to find roles that would kind of fit that interest?
It was not nearly so planned, so well planned. So I actually had a good friend from college who was from the Bay Area. And I was like living like after college, working in Birmingham and, just like not feeling it. Life after college, I wanted to have something different, be somewhere else than where I was raised.
Yeah.
And my friend, she was like, "Well, come out to the Bay Area. You can crash on my couch." And
Love that.
so, yeah, yeah. And it just so happened that my one of my mom's friends had a Southwest voucher that was about to expire. So grabbed the voucher, packed a bag, and I've been here really ever since. So just
I
making
love that. I
Mhm.
love Southwest, first of all. And second, I love that you literally hopped on a plane, but because of an almost expiring voucher, and like, this is why you're here today. That's a really cool story.
I think that's probably I would say it might be a trend of just like doing things like a little bit impulsively and, trying to change my state of being. So, and that was a big one that it stuck. So, mhm.
Well, I love that you're here however many years later.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned a little bit like spontaneity. How did you think about moving roles when you were earlier in your career? I know you've worked for a couple of different like nonprofits earlier in your career. So what were some of the factors that you thought about when making those changes? Were they more spontaneous, like an opportunity came up and you made a move, or were you intentional about making those moves?
I would say that I started off like working with SPUR, San Francisco Planning and Urban Research, and that was like a great way to like um, really be involved with people who are doing a lot of interesting and different things in the public space and like in the planning and some of the like secondary, ecosystems with that. And so I was able to build connections through there. And, I was always like just ready to say yes to new opportunities as they came up. So, yeah, I would say that like spontaneity definitely has like played a big factor in that. And then also, just always interested in trying something new. I would say that that's really like a driver for me is like wanting to do something that I haven't done before.
Yeah, I love that. Always learning, like
Yeah, always
making
learn.
sure that you're challenging yourself and keeping that learning going throughout life, right?
Yes. Yeah, I would say that's a trend for me. So whether or not it's like intentional, but I think like, yeah, having that challenge is really important.
Cool. How did you go from that nonprofit kind of world where you did a couple of different um, roles at a couple of different organizations into becoming an independent consultant?
Yes. So there were a few intermediate steps. So I like as like a 24, 25-year old working in the urban planning space is actually pretty challenging because it's just like a very slow working with government is just working with a very like slow moving ship. And so I was just kind of exhausted with like this. It's very important work, but it's like also just like I felt like there was just meetings about meetings and
Yeah.
lots of like,
Like
you know,
bureaucracy.
yeah, a lot of bureaucracy and like I think like I'm still on all these mailing lists and like all these on these projects that I was like helping like kick off, which I'm very proud of. But like, well, it's been like 10 years and they've just now like really like evolved into their fully fledged form. So,
Mm.
I think I was really ready for something that was a little bit more fast paced. And I was in the Bay Area. I was like living in Oakland at the time, and I was like, what is all this stuff about startups? And so I made a decision to try to get my foot in the door at a startup. And so I first joined an educational startup. It is, no law, it's defunct.
As most startups are, right? But
Yes.
most startups don't make it.
Yeah, so it was like an early stage startup. It was very exciting to be a part of something that was like growing and it had a lot of energy and like being around. I was like with the company as they were like, going through their like Series A and, all of that. And so it was very, very exciting. So I started actually doing like with their like account management kind of position there. But I had a really great manager and he encouraged me to get into data actually. So I had all these questions and it was like, what does this all mean? Like trying to understand my accounts better and like trying to like make more informed decisions. And
Mhm.
so I like bugged the engineers enough to like open like let them open up the database for me, and I taught myself SQL, and
Good
just
for you.
it kind of just evolved from there. And so it was, honestly, it was really empowering. It was really really empowering to be able to like help say, it's like actually, this is really what's happening with
Mhm.
the company or like this segment of the business. So that was really cool.
So that
Uh,
was your first experience kind of looking at data and helping make better decisions for like your specific accounts and for the company by using data to kind of tell a story.
yes, yeah. So that was really cool. It was my first taste.
The
Uh,
first taste that's obviously put you on a career path that is very different than urban planning, right?
yes, it was much better than freeze dried ice cream.
Freeze-dried ice cream, data. I think a 5-year-old might disagree with you there, but maybe a 25 or a 35-year-old might be right on the same boat. Cool. So, how did you kind of like make that jump to say, you know what, I really want to pursue a career in data? Kind of what was that catalyst to make that change and kind of what was going through your mind as you were thinking about that?
Yeah, so I would say like the big catalyst was honestly getting laid off
Mm,
from that startup. So, I was just a part of like the first round of layoffs, and that was kind of an eye opener for me, and like just realizing that, if I keep this title that I have, account manager, I realize that these are some of the first people to go. And so stability is important to me, and
yeah.
it's feelings that I don't really want to like replicate, just I know it's just part of like being in, getting your stripes in the startup world, but it's like also it's a bummer.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have build some more durable skills.
Mm.
And I saw that with data, that was definitely a path, and that's actually like where I first learned about like data science, and it's like an emerging field. I think the term for data scientist hadn't been around. I think it was like 2012 or something. It's like a very new field, so I was just learning about it, and yeah, wanting to like make that commitment to data and try to make myself an expert as much as I could.
For the folks listening who might not know the difference between a data analyst and a data scientist, as you said, the field's really only been around for maybe a decade. What is the difference between the two types of roles?
It's a hot question. Um, I if it depends on who you ask,
Okay.
and also, you know, yeah, it really depends on who you ask. So I know folks who are called data analysts, but at a company like Asana, they would be considered data scientists.
Mm.
And so it's a very flexible term. But I think like really what separates a data, in my opinion, what separates a data analyst from a data scientist is building out more like causality, like building out more causal inference between an input and an output. So like trying to understand the why, and
Mm.
rather than explaining this is what, being more descriptive about what's happening, and like trying to just dig in there a little bit more about why it's happening.
So, in summary, you would say a data analyst, depending on where you go, could be an analyst, it could be a scientist, but a data scientist really dives into the why of what's causing X versus Y, or what's causing the relationship between X and Y.
Yes, that's a
Okay.
great.
Great. I'm practicing my active listening, so hopefully I did a good job there. So what are some of the tasks and projects you enjoy doing at work today?
Yeah, I think some of the things that I most enjoy are working on longer term analyses. So really trying to help teams just like explain trends. So I think try to think of a good example. So something that was really fun that I've been working on, or I kicked off the work, and is classifying accounts at Asana, and being able to try to put them in a discrete framework. So as we know, there's like it's really hard to bucket accounts that
Mm.
have a lot of different characteristics with them. And it's like, how can you say that one account is, in the same bucket as another account? So that was something that was really exciting to work on, because it required like a lot of like input and like kind of qualitative feedback from like the actual salespeople who are working with these accounts, and like what did they think, and then also like the more the sales revenue teams, or like the folks that are like more close to the um, just more close to the data for those
Mm.
accounts, to like really
Similar
help.
to you being an account manager back in the day, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So like it really took like a lot of these different it required me to like take a lot of input from these other people, and to kind of like and then apply, what I know about the data to kind of create this like formula for account classification. So that was exciting.
I can tell you have a lot of energy around that. And I know that some people might think, Katherine, why do you find that so interesting? But everyone has their thing that just like lights them up every day. And it sounds like creating order out of chaos is something that is really interesting and enlightening for you to work on. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. I think like I really enjoy like solving puzzles, like just the puzzle of it. And I was like, what
Mhm.
does this mean? Trying to find a pattern. So I don't necessarily think that the subject matter is like super engaging. Like it's not going to be something that, I want to try to replicate in some other kind of situation, but I definitely think that like just the day-to-day work remains engaging,
Mm.
over time.
I know that's something you mentioned earlier, like learning and challenging yourself is something that's really important to you. And it sounds like in the world of data, you have this kind of framework that you can apply to all of these different types of puzzles. So you're never solving the same puzzle twice. And that sounds just really intellectually stimulating. that every day you are coming to work and having a new challenge that you're trying to solve. And I can imagine it never gets boring.
Yeah, I mean,
Or does it?
I think sometimes there's just like hard problems and that don't
Yeah.
have really clean solutions. And that can be kind of wearing because you want to create a box that it all fits in, but it's either not within my skill set or, there isn't a box for it. So,
Mhm.
um, that offer, I'm trying to like get to the point where it's like, oh, that's great information to know that this set of data does not have a box. But I'm still working on that.
Still working on that. Work in progress.
Always.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So I actually want to go back a couple of years in your career because I know that you ended up doing a little data scientist boot camp,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So is that a type of program that how did you kind of get into that? I know the layoff helped spur kind of that move of like getting more into data and kind of becoming an independent consultant. So how did you navigate the decision of I'm making this big career change, like urban planning to data? How did you decide to go to a boot camp? Because they're kind of all the rage these days, and I feel
Yeah.
like you did it several years before they were all the rage. So how did you kind of make that decision, and what advice would you give to someone today who's thinking about going into a boot camp for whatever field that they're interested in?
Sure, sure. Those are great questions. So I guess to start at the beginning, I would say that I got into consulting and I think I was a little bit too big for my britches, honestly. And so I was able to like support myself on this, but I was working on like problems that were not very interesting and they were honestly kind of small. And so I felt like I wanted more of like a challenge in terms of like working with bigger data and like working with like, more complex problems, etc. I would say that like working in having my own like set of clients, like it really helps super challenging in just terms of like learning how to manage myself and like how to manage clients, and also gave me the opportunity to like work and travel simultaneously, so that was really cool. But yeah, I decided that it just wasn't like sustainable in terms of like wanting to learn and grow in the field because I was just working by myself and I wasn't learning from
Yeah.
anyone. So I didn't have any coworkers, just solving problems the best that I could. So I wanted to go and so I made the commitment to myself to go into the boot camp to try to make this like concerted effort of like learning and challenging myself to like to make this like bigger commitment to data.
And that brings me to like my next question, which is you and I've met through something called The Crew, which for folks that don't know about this type of organization or this type of career development program, it's a group of women that meet once a month to hold ourselves accountable to making changes in life, whether that's careers or creative projects or focusing on yourself, whatever those kind of intentions are. It's a group of folks that can get together to make these intentional changes. And so, Katherine, like you and I met through our crew, which I'm so grateful for. And part of that was that you are looking to kind of make that official move from data analyst to data scientist. And where you are today is a really, really interesting point in your career, which I would love to kind of talk through. That you're doing an unofficial kind of internship as
Yeah.
a data scientist. I
Yes.
would love to hear how that's going, how it's different from your analyst role for what you were doing immediately beforehand.
Yeah, that's happy to chat about that. So I have been lucky enough to have a super supportive manager and really like challenging me on like some great projects and really I feel like that she's really interested in my development as a person. And so she was able to connect with another team. So I'm like in the business side of the organization, and there's another data scientist that needed some help, just like, a short term amount of help for the time being. And so I was stepping in to help him try to, amp up the amount of work that he could do. So yeah, this was in the product org. So definitely it's like working with a different set of data, and then also doing things that I hadn't ever been exposed to, like experimentation. So this is like the causal piece that I was explaining about before, about, the why and the why A affects B. So I would say it's been really good. And yeah, so we'll see how it all shakes out. But I think like it's been definitely challenging, but I don't think that I would say that the day to day hasn't been extremely different than the day to day as an analyst versus the data science role that I'm in temporarily. But I do think that I think that there is like a lot more depth to be explored in building more complexity into how problems are solved.
Yeah. The complexity really sounds like it's right up your alley. The whole time we've been talking about your career, it's all about like learning and taking advantage of new opportunities. And it seems like this is an experience that you took an opportunity to learn a heck of a lot more complex problems. So that's really cool to kind of see your whole career really coming together at this point, which is such a instrumental part of your career. Hopefully, in a couple of years you look back on this time period and you're like, yes, thank goodness I kind of took that leap. I would love to hear how you talked to your manager about making this like temporary move, in case folks are looking to make a move internally or are wanting some guidance on like how do they even start this type of a conversation for, a temporary lateral move or something like that.
Yeah, so I would say, like, if I were to give someone advice, I would say it's like really evaluate what kind of relationship you have with your manager, and if they're even open to like having how they feel about giving you up from their team. As we said, I've had a lot of different roles and a lot of different managers. So, I know that some managers can be more protective of their headcount. Yeah, but I was just very frank with her about like my role, what I wasn't happy with, things that were like causing me anxiety. I was like very like upfront about it. It's like, there's this one process that I had to do every Monday, and it was just like a super drag. And Sunday
Mondays are already hard, right?
Mondays are already hard. I don't need them to bleed into Sunday to
Yeah.
like, the dread. So I was really like open with her starting that about like, this is really, I'm feeling a lot of friction here. How can we change this? And from there, she really started, I think, doing some like exploration of her own about like what other teams are in need, and like how can these tasks that were causing me so much anxiety, like how can they be filled some other way? And
Mhm.
so yeah, it was probably like a 6 month process, I would say, to get me from A to B. And I think honesty is your friend. I think like don't be afraid of saying what you need.
Mhm. Yeah, I think self advocacy is really important for folks to think about, especially like young women in their careers. And so hearing it from you that, being honest with someone that you can trust, I think trust is a big part of your
Yes.
success at this point too, is that you had a manager that you could trust to have these honest conversations with. So it's really great to hear that you kind of had this internal advocate at the company to say, okay, where are there gaps? Where can we fit Katherine to kind of meet the needs of both parties? Of the company needs a little bit of help here, Katherine's looking to explore a little bit here, and kind of where is that sweet spot?
Yeah. And I would also say that, like, yeah, the internal advocacy. And if you don't have that in a manager, it's like, are there other mentors you can reach out to? Like, either in your, either a role that you're like maybe interested in or your dream role or whatever, I had the opportunity to connect with like a mentor in the company who's higher up. And so, like, having him as a sounding board, going through some of this was also super helpful about how to approach your manager. And so, I think maybe if you have like a more difficult, like, manager situation, it's like, how can you like reach out to other people who can maybe help you understand the political landscape within the company?
Yeah. Internal politics are something, I think every person is going to forever hate office politics, but if you have that person who can help guide you and kind of, take your hand as you're going through it, makes every journey a little bit easier.
100%.
Yeah, cool. I'd love to have one more conversation about conversations with your manager and how you navigate feedback and like have leveraged feedback, especially as you're in this point where you're really learning a lot. You're, using a completely different data set than the one you were using in your actual day job, right? So how have you kind of leveraged feedback such as like the start, stop, continue method or peer feedback as you're developing this data scientist skill set?
Yeah, so I love slash hate feedback. Um,
You're preaching to the choir.
so I think I've mentioned it to you before, Audrey, that I am I cry at, I'm a crier. And so like
Me
receiving
too.
feedback can be very difficult, especially in like a professional situation, because like the moment I get it, actually, also if it's good, I also start crying. So
Just tears for everything.
yeah, it's just happens. So I've been working on that honestly, on like, ways to manage my physical reaction to feedback. And then with that like physical reaction, like I've also been very avoidant on soliciting feedback, but I realized that with this like internship, it was really important for me to let my new team know that I'm someone who wants to grow and wants to learn from them. So I realized that asking for feedback is an important part of that. So yeah, I when I first came onto the team, I created this like document, like a success guide
Oh,
about
that's great.
yeah. So they had like design like some projects that I needed to like check off and get done, and then like also what does success look like for these projects. So that was like an important first step. And then periodically checking in with the team about how I'm just like doing day to day. And as you mentioned, or as I mentioned before, I use the stop start continue framework, which I think it's a great way to ask for feedback, because it's like really like, I think it's like pretty like low stakes for the person you're soliciting the feedback from,
Mhm.
because it can just be a list. It doesn't have to be some kind of like larger document, or you know um, it doesn't have to be around like a specific body of work, which I mean, that could have its own difficulties, but or drawbacks. But um yeah, so it's been really, I've had great feedback. And the feedback that I did get about the continue or the points to grow on, not unexpected. And so I think, just checking in to make sure that you're on the same page is super important.
E-
And yeah.
Especially since you're, having a very finite kind of temporary lateral move, that it's really great to know in the middle of it, like what you should start doing and that you aren't doing, what you've been doing that, maybe isn't helpful to you or to the team, and then something that they've really enjoyed seeing from you and that they want to have you continue doing. And that must be a confidence boost too, that if you go into those conversations having done a little bit of self work and self reflection, have these expectations and have that reflected back to you, that also must feel really good as well.
Yeah, it does. It feels really good. It's really validating. And also because of the temporary nature of this, like, my role or like, my internship, like, I don't want to have a surprise at the end, of
Right.
like, oh, actually, you were really not good on this one part. And, that is, yeah, no one likes surprises.
No one likes surprises, especially like you and me, we're both criers, right? We don't want to have tears start coming out.
Oh, yeah, surprises definitely cause a lot of tears.
Yeah. So start, stop, continue means there's no surprises at the end of it. So I love to hear that. And I hope our listeners, double click on that because it's a really valuable framework that takes a lot of pressure off of both parties too.
Yes.
So we've listened to a ton of really great nuggets of like kind of how you've gotten to where you are today and where you are today. And I would love to hear kind of what you're thinking about for kind of like your next 3 to 6 months. So super short term, but then also long term, like what you're thinking your career might look like in the next 5 to 10.
Oh, great question. Well, hopefully in the next 3 to 6 months, maybe this internship will continue.
Fingers crossed.
Maybe fingers crossed. Maybe I'll actually like be pulled onto the team as a full data scientist. We'll
Oh,
see.
that's the thing we're fingers crossed for sure.
Definitely. Um, but yeah, so like excited to possibly continue on this, like definitely continue on the data path and like trying to get onto the data science track. I think in terms of like longer term growth, I definitely feel like data science has a more I feel like data analyst has a lower, the title at least has a lower bound, or has a lower upper bound of
Mhm.
growth. And so moving up to the data science title will really help, expand future opportunities. So like that's definitely in, the next 5 years for sure. I want it to be less than 5 years.
I have a
But
feeling you'll get there. You seem very motivated and, really gung ho about data science. So,
yeah, so I was actually thinking about this, how could I like make this happen? And, maybe some grad schools in the future about like
mm,
building up a credential and, that could really help. I think maybe like fill in some gaps in my knowledge. I've taken some like college statistics and done some, self-learning on the side, but maybe having a more formal education could help get me there
mhm.
and continue to work on like more and more challenging kinds of problems.
Yeah, you definitely are a learner, as we've kind of established. So it doesn't actually surprise me you're thinking maybe grad school at some point in the future. What do you think would steer you towards making that decision to go to school?
Hmm. I think something that's important to me, I'm a little bit older than I think a lot of like grad school people. So I think I'm 35. So I think like that I'd want to make sure that I'm working while also going to school.
Mhm.
So
So like a part-time program.
yeah, so like a part-time program, seeing if there's something that can fit my life and my goals. And so I think that would probably be a big blocker. And then also kind of, I think trying to get more of a sense of how much more could grad school offer me. I don't
Mhm.
think I don't have a clear understanding of that quite yet. And I think that will require more conversations with people in the field that I admire, in the company, outside of the company. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see where the next couple of years take you. Maybe you'll get a couple of extra letters at the end of your name, like like that MS, I think is MSc, whatever the Masters of Science is, which I'm assuming data science would be under. So maybe we'll see that from you in a couple of years. So exciting to kind of see where the future takes you. So, Katherine, I want to say thank you so much for having this really, really incredible conversation about, changing roles so drastically from like urban planning to data. You wouldn't think they're really related at all, but here you are, you've made that change, especially as you're today at a very critical point where you're trying to make that move and up level to the scientist title. So hopefully we see that from you very, very soon. So to close us out today, I would love to know what piece of advice you would give to women in the middle of their careers right now.
Something that keeps me going is a quote that you can apply it. I apply it to every tough situation that I'm in. And it's a Rilke. It's just an excerpt from a Rilke poem. And it's just keep going. No feeling is final. So just keep going. You think that you're in, a low point or just an obstacle that seems insurmountable. You're strong. You can go through it. So just keep going. And if you want it, I think you can get it.
I love that. What a great way to end our conversation today. So Katherine, thank you so much for joining us. This was such a great conversation. I'm sure folks are going to have a ton of nuggets to take away with them as they think about their own careers. So Katherine, from astronaut to future data scientist, thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Thanks so much, Audrey.
Wow, what a woman. But before we close out the episode, we have a very important update about Katherine. For context on timing, our episode was recorded on January 13th. I caught up with Katherine last week, and she's wrapped up her internship and just finished some interviews with another team at the company and got a job offer. So she's starting her new role in data this week. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about making a lateral move at your company. It can take a lot of time, so be thoughtful, intentional, and patient with the process. You are going to end up where you need to be. Round of applause for Katherine as she stepped outside her comfort zone, got the feedback she needed to be successful in her next step, and will be applying her knowledge to a new job very soon. If you liked this episode, please share this conversation with the fabulous gal pals in your life. Because hearing about a woman taking risks and trying something new could lead a woman in your life to think, if she can do it, so can I. In the show notes, you can find links to the resources we talked about in the interview, ways to connect with both me, Audrey the Career Woman, and our guest Katherine, and a link to sign up for exclusive insights into the making of each episode and monthly career development recommendations. Like, subscribe, rate, and follow so you don't miss a future episode of Women Just Like You. See you next Wednesday for another episode of the show, where we'll talk to a kick-ass mom who's leveraging TikTok to generate leads for her mortgage banking business. And with that, thanks so much for tuning in this week to my conversation with Katherine on Women Just Like You. See you on air soon, gals. Bye.